the kind of place I've always imagined.
Hi everyone, welcome to Cinostalgia, a new video series here on Cinemagic TV in which we highlight international films from years gone by that continue to entertain and resonate with audiences today. In our first edition, we will discuss the Japanese animated film Kiki's Delivery Service. With me today is Annabel, who has just seen this film for the very first time, and this is actually my second viewing, having watched this film a couple of years ago. So we have a novice's first impression and someone who's seen this film before. So it's an interesting dynamic here today. So in this new series, Cinostalgia, we're just going to discuss the film in question in terms of a number of different categories. So a bit of background information, what's the storyline, our initial impressions of the film, our favourite scene, our favourite character, our favourite line, and finally, how has the film aged since its release? So today's film is Kiki's Delivery Service, which was released in 1989 and was written and directed by Hayao Miyazaki, animated by Studio Ghibli, a studio which was founded by Miyazaki and Isao Takahata in 1985. In fact, the film itself was based on a 1985 novel by Eiko Kodano. The story follows a young witch who leaves home and embarks on a journey to the port city of Kuriko, where she finds work delivering goods for a bakery. So before we get into our discussion, there's a couple of interesting background details with this film. So Miyazaki did actually not intend to direct the film at first, but his influence over the project became so heavy that he eventually decided to take the reins and oversee the final product. It was also intended to be a 60-minute special, but was expanded into a feature film after storyboards and rewrites. And in 1998, Walt Disney Pictures distributed a dubbed version of the film in English, with Kirsten Dunst voicing Kiki. So, Annabelle, what were your initial impressions of Kiki's Delivery Service?
Well, as I said, I'm not particularly into animation. It's not something I watch very often, but I always surprise myself with how much I enjoy it, and Kiki's Delivery Service definitely fits that. I thought that the animation was beautiful, and I thought that I was engaged from the word go. I definitely thought the kind of background story of Kiki and her family, I thought the idea of how witches are kind of accepted in society, I thought that was a really interesting take. So yeah, I was engaged from the start, definitely.
Well, it's great to hear that someone who's only just seen this film enjoyed it so much, because this is actually one of my favourite Studio Ghibli films. And it's because it gives such a refreshingly candid approach to the subject of a young person gaining independence. The focus is kept on Kiki's internal struggles and the difficulties she has balancing her job with her magical abilities, as well as to focus on her developing social skills and interacting with members of Kuriko's society. So in terms of your favourite scene, Annabelle, which one stood out to you the most?
Well, I actually thought they were all very naturalistic scenes. I thought that there wasn't anything kind of over the top. I really did love this scene where Kiki's friend in the forest, I can't remember her name actually, the character's name, but she was the artist in the forest. And I loved when Kiki went to her cabin and stayed with her for the night, and they had this really like intimate, warm discussion, and it was made warm through the colours and the kind of the setting that was created. And I thought that was really, really sweet. I really enjoyed that scene, that moment.
Yeah, I believe Ursula is the name actually, which is interesting given that this was released the same year as another animated film with a prominent character called Ursula, the Little Mermaid. So an interesting coincidence there. Yeah, it's funny how these things correspond.
Yeah,
yeah. That scene will come up later for me in a different category. But my pick for the standout scene in the film is actually one that has no dialogue. It's not driven. It's kind of driven by music, the atmosphere, the animation, and just the overall tone of sincerity. And that's when Kiki comes home with Gigi, and she sees that Osono, who's the owner of a bakery, who takes her in and eventually allows Kiki to run this delivery service of the bakery. And her and her husband have made a sign of Kiki and Gigi, which appears in the shop window. And I think it's just a lovely moment. It really demonstrates how small acts of kindness can be so valuable. In relation to your favorite character then, Annabel, who would you say was the character that you really connected with the most?
Well, I'd say I don't know about connected with most, but definitely the character that kind of stood out to me that I really enjoyed their almost role within Kiki's story was Gigi. I find that everyone around Kiki kind of like glorifies her in her way. You know, her parents see her as this perfect angel, and then the people who work at the bakery, as you just said in that lovely scene, they're so supportive of her and they're so open to her and who she is. And just it seems to be everyone she meets just loves her. And then Gigi kind of comes along and he's like the realist. He'll just tell her how it is and just make sure that she stays very grounded in every situation she's in. So I think he's a brilliant addition. And because he is so, are you sure? He kind of asks in a very Gigi kind of way. He asks, and every time something pops up, he's like, are you sure about this? You know, he makes sure that she is thinking straight. And I think he was a great character to have. He was very well developed.
Gigi is the black cat who accompanies Kiki on her journey to Kuriko. And he could easily be a character who kind of falls into the stereotype of your typical kind of sidekick, the talking animal, but he really doesn't. He injects the film with humor, but it's in moments that need it rather than kind of distracting from the overall story. In terms of my favorite character, and again, this is going back to my pick for the previous category about favorite scene, Asano for me was a real standout. I just think she makes for, you know, we see a lot of films where the main character has to deal with like a really tough boss or someone who's very demanding and very tough. But she is so welcoming, and the fact that he provides accommodation for Kiki, who returns the favor by helping out in the bakery, it's just a lovely dynamic. And she kind of, even though Kiki has parents in her original hometown, I think Asano takes on the role of the mother figure for her in this particular setting. Okay, favorite line now. Annabel, what would you pick for this?
I ended up kind of almost forgetting to pick out like a specific line. So yeah, no, I just thought the dialogue as a whole was very easy to follow, easy to listen to. I honestly forgot to pick out a line because I was just like watching it, just like, oh wow, this is so good. So yeah, sorry about that. I didn't get one specific line, but as a whole, the dialogue was lovely, really easy to follow.
I don't really blame you, because this film is so overwhelming in terms of the animation and just the spectacle of it. I think almost trying to nail down one line is a bit reductive in a way, because there's so much going on with, like, the dialogue itself is, as you say, is really nice, and the interactions are great between all the characters. But I think there's one moment, and it's actually a scene you referred to earlier, the scene between Ursula and Kiki. And there's a moment when Kiki's questioning herself and she's lost some of her kind of magical abilities. And there's a moment where Ursula relates to her with her own struggles as an artist and what drives her to keep pursuing her goals and her ambitions. And there's a moment where Kiki questions this and says, maybe I need to find my own inspiration, but am I ever going to find it? And is it worth all the trouble? And again, this is a really, I think, a theme that will resonate a lot with young people in particular, where they have a certain ambition, they question where it's worth pursuing. You know, is it worth all this trouble to try and achieve a certain goal? And I think that really hits home, that line in particular, that question Kiki has. That's really the film in a nutshell, is her deciding how she can best adapt to this new environment. Okay, so on to the final category then, Annabel. How would you say this film has aged? So it was released in 1989, but do you think this film still holds up today in terms of the animation, the themes, the characters? What would you say?
I would say it's aged relatively well. Obviously, there's a certain limit because of when it was made in the animation, but I think for its time, that it is timeless. You know, there was never a moment in the whole thing, and I was probably examining it because I'm very picky with animation, but there was never a moment where I thought the cinematography or the animation was poorly done. I thought that the attention to detail, especially to the houses and kind of the surroundings of the houses, like the gardens and the ivy and the roses growing up the walls, and, you know, the level of detail in the animation kind of erased the fact of how old it was and how that maybe it wouldn't be like technology, I guess, wise, it maybe wouldn't be as good as some stuff today, but the level of detail was incredible. And I think that because of that, it has edged really well, and I would describe it as timeless, definitely.
I think that some people might argue that it perhaps feels a bit utopian in just how nice and sincere everyone is. Do you think there'd be one character who is a bit snarky towards Kiki or tries to kind of be an antagonist in the storyline? But there really isn't. And I think it's how frank it is about certain issues like homesickness, for example, and managing one's work life with their social life, and how they can't be resolved quickly. Like then the film, you know, although it's a very uplifting film, I said a few minutes ago, there is a lot of ambiguity to the ending.
I think the fact that there is no kind of grand ending or any kind of clear resolvement of the issues just reinforces that you're not going to achieve your, you know, perfect, ideal, trouble-less life when you're young. You know, it does kind of reinforce the fact that there are going to be struggles. And I think it captures the perfect kind of, it's very realistic. It doesn't glorify anything. It's just following a young girl through her life for a while. And I think it's brilliant for young people to watch, and I definitely encourage people to do so.
So we'll wrap up there, and thanks everyone for watching this first edition of Cinostalgia. We hope you enjoy it, and we'll be looking forward to seeing you next week for our latest edition. Thanks everybody.
Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.